thank the College of Social Work for inviting me to speak today. And I'd also like to say thank you to all the faculty members, staff, family, and friends who helped me and my fellow graduates get here to graduation day. To my fellow graduates, congratulations. All of the time we've devoted to completing group projects, increasing our self-awareness, and wrangling with AP style has paid off. As Dean Clark mentioned, social work is not my first career. It's not even my second or third career. For 2 decades, I worked in other professions, and all of those experiences have brought me where I believe I was always meant to end up, right here today, receiving my MSW degree. I'd like to tell you about one of the most difficult lessons I learned during my time as a social work student at FSU. To share that story with you, I need to start by telling you a little bit about one of my very first jobs. When I was 15, I got a job as a busgirl at a magic-themed restaurant. I was in high school at the time and was willing to take any job that paid more than minimum wage, even one that required me to wear suspenders and a bow tie. My duties included clearing dirty plates from tables, handing out balloons to kids, and being hacked in half each night by one of the resident magicians. About halfway through my shift, the magician beckoned to me, and I took off my apron, climbed on stage, and stepped inside a wooden box about the size of the phone booth. The magician pulled out a huge sword and waved it menacingly at the diners. He paused for dramatic effect, then plunged the sword into a hole drilled straight through the middle of the box. When the sword's shiny tip emerged from the other side, everyone in the audience gasped. Occasionally, a small child would cry. To the audience, it looked as though the magician had cut me in two. When he swung open the door in the wooden box and I bounded out, completely unharmed and ready to resume refilling water glasses, the audience always erupted in cheers. The box's door concealed me from my bow tie down to my shoes, so the audience could watch my face during the entire magic trick. At first, I had a tough time figuring out what sort of facial expression to make when the magician stabbed the sword through the box, and presumably through me. I tried out a stoic stare and a pained grimace before settling on a wide-eyed look of surprise that the audience loved. The more exaggerated and artificial my shocked expression was, the louder the audience gasped in dismay, and the more boisterously they cheered when I emerged from the box unharmed. That gig at the restaurant turned out to be my only job where I was professionally required to be a complete and total phony. But in some ways, I feel as though I've been faking it in my professional life ever since. I've been in the working world for more than 20 years, and my career path looks like a road trip with lots of scenic detours. I worked as a journalist and rock critic. I was a teacher's assistant at a public high school. I did marketing and public relations for a rural hospital, and I once owned a Mexican restaurant. Objectively, I performed well at all of these jobs. No matter how many professional accomplishments I racked up though, I've spent most of my career feeling as though I'm stumbling around without any idea what I'm doing. I've always believed that I'm one major screw-up away from being outed as a total fraud. It turns out that I'm not the only one who feels this way. Quite a few of my fellow social work students, and a couple of my professional mentors as well, have confided in me that sometimes they fear that they're not as competent as other people think they are. These are all talented, dedicated social workers who, in my view, have no reason at all to doubt themselves. A few years ago, I came across an article that put a name to that faking and feeling some of my colleagues and I have experienced: imposter syndrome. In 1978, a pair of clinical psychologists coined the term to describe the irrational fear that some high-achieving individuals have of being exposed as a fraud. When I read in the article that many smart, successful women experience this phenomenon, I immediately thought, well, clearly I'm not qualified to have imposter syndrome. You can see how deep the problem runs, right? When my meandering career path eventually led me to social work, no one was more surprised than I was. I didn't fit into the stereotypical social worker mold. I'm impatient, incorrigibly snarky, and quite fond of four-letter words. But I've always been a fixer. I love helping other people solve their problems. I thought that getting a Master of Social Work degree would give me all the tools I needed to be a world-class fixer. Now that I'm finished with my MSW program, sounds weird to say that, now that I'm finished with my MSW program, I can see how much I've learned about social work along the way. For one thing, there is no stereotypical social worker. I think those of you in this room can attest to that. I've also realized that social workers aren't fixers, They play a supporting role as people work to overcome their own challenges. There's one lesson I've wrestled with, though, during my entire time as a student. Social workers have to accept that sometimes a person's problem is so complex or overwhelming that there's nothing anyone can do to help solve it, at least not right away. As one of my professors, Margaret Ashmore, explained it to my crisis intervention class, sometimes the only thing you can do is sit with someone as they struggle. Those words jolted me to my core. You see, I've never been a sitter. I may not believe that I know what I'm doing, but you can bet that I'm going to jump into action anyway and keep chugging along until the problem at hand is solved or I've thoroughly exhausted myself. All through my MSW program, I've kept coming back to my professor's words, turning them over and over in my mind. I figured that my inability to accept what she said proved that, as I suspected all along, I'm not really a social worker. I'm just an imposter. This semester, I completed my final internship at a local alternative school. Many of the students I work with have experienced trauma and face significant challenges not just in school, but in their personal lives as well. There were so many things I could do to provide assistance to these kids. I could listen to them talk about their problems, I could teach them how to manage situations that freak them out, or I could give them a granola bar when they had skipped breakfast. But there were also a lot of things I couldn't do. Day after day, my young clients told me about problems that are too big for them or me, or for anyone to solve with a conversation, a breathing exercise, or a snack. When that happened, I felt helpless. A couple of months ago, 2 girls got into a fight at the school. This was a full-on, punches thrown, hair yanked out kind of fight. When it was over, I was asked to sit with one of the girls until her mom picked her up. She was red-faced and teary. I asked the girl if she needed anything, and she shook her head and turned away from me. I sat next to this girl as the minutes ticked by, one by one. Every time she choked back a sob, my brain screamed, do something. But this girl didn't want to talk. She didn't want a glass of water, and she definitely didn't want a granola bar. There wasn't a single action I could leap up and take in that moment to make her feel better. So I sat there with her, glancing over every once in a while to make sure she was okay. The girl kept her face turned away from me, and I could see the tears steadily rolling down the side of her cheek. I continued to sit there, and I fought the urge to busy myself with some other task. I simply focused all my energy on sitting next to this girl as she cried. Finally, something happened, something so small I almost missed it. The next time I glanced at the girl, she looked back at me for just a second. I watched as every couple of minutes, she looked over at me for a moment or two. All of a sudden, I realized what she was doing. She was checking to see if I was still there. The next time she looked at me, I nodded at her. Yes, I'm still here. Slowly, her snuffles quieted. In that moment, I knew exactly what I was doing. My professor's words finally made sense to me. The only thing I could do was sit with this girl as she lived through something painful, and I was doing it. I didn't feel helpless, and I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like a social worker.